Right, so our second day plan is to basically make a process of how to approach this project. We captured some Unreal inspiration stuff using AI, but this could be mood boards or anything you can find from movies in our previous video. And we're gonna attempt to create something similar to this vibe. So right off the bat, I'm seeing we're gonna need trees, we're gonna need a small landscape. We don't need to be quite crazy with it to save some memory and GPU for those who don't have strong GPU with big memory. And maybe I'm gonna figure out the birds. I am not sure if there's any good bird assets, but this will be something we do last, and I might really try to do that later in the post. We'll see how that works out. And this is kind of what we're seeing. We're gonna start to build this, and we're gonna go ahead and render certain frames and figure out which render settings is Lumen and Raytracing helping us in this scenario, which I think it will. Path tracing now is helping with the fog. Before, in the earlier versions, path tracing wasn't working with the exponential height fog, and you had to sort of put fog cards or create post-process materials for fog to get around that. But now path tracing will work with that. But the downside, this is not really an architectural project. We don't want to really wait too long for path tracing. We don't really have a lot of reflections. Maybe for what we talked about in the beach scene, I could see that as a more architectural project, and if you're having some water reflections and whatnot, ray tracing and path tracing could come in handy. But I think for our forest idea, we're gonna be okay with Lumen and nanites and foliage, landscape auto materials. So here's the plan that I made. We're gonna bring in assets from older project files by migrating, because you're gonna run into this issue. When you have something like early access 5.2 or any new version of Unreal, you are gonna download some really cool stuff from other creators or Megascans. In my case, I'm gonna try to use their oak forest assets, European forest assets. But what do I do if, when I try to add this to a project, I don't really see my witch's castle? That's because these are not built for 5.2. So one way you can try to get around with that when you have a new version, obviously most of you know, is to put that into a dummy project, edit there, and then migrate it. We can try and go ahead and do that. So this is my dummy project that I usually put stuff that I worked on, useful landscape materials that I wrote that does vertex blending with Megascan assets. We'll touch base on that. Some blueprints that I wrote, or just Megascans that I want to migrate for whatever reason, or try something else. So we got a tree pack pine over here, and we can try to migrate that. I have two projects open here. The oak forest, I already migrated it and it came successfully. So let's try and do that with the tree pack pine. I'm not sure which trees we're gonna use yet, but all we have to do is, after we add this through our Epic Games Launcher vault, if we like an asset, these don't exist in the Quixel library, they do it as a project. So we go ahead and find Megascan trees, European, say add to project, This is our dummy project, add to project. I already have that, so I'm gonna say cancel. And I'm gonna go ahead and I don't know which one exactly it is, but we're gonna migrate. Oh, there it is, black alder. We're gonna go right click and then we're gonna say import content, or sorry, we're gonna say migrate. Yeah, there it is, migrate. And it's gonna select everything that this either might be a level or blueprint, whatever it is associated with the setup. I'm gonna say okay, and I'm gonna find my project in the 5.2 early access, which is the Witch's Forest, which is what we named it. And we're gonna make sure once we're in that correct project, we're gonna go into the content folder, and this is where we're gonna dump it. You don't necessarily need to be in the project at all when you're doing this. I don't recommend it if you don't have a good processor or a CPU or a GPU to do, have two heavy projects open at the same time. But for now, I'm doing okay. And maybe we're gonna do the same thing for the pine. Let's see what we already transferred. We got the oak forest, and we have the black alder. So we're gonna go ahead and also bring in pines. Migrate. Same thing. Okay. We're already in the content for the Witch's Forest, so select. And we're good. I'm gonna close this out. And we should be okay for now. If we need it, we're gonna open it up again and add it to that project. So that's one of the first parts, right? You can try to do this with whatever you might have used before, volumetric packs, asset packs. That doesn't necessarily work with Blueprints 5.2 because it wasn't written for that. You're not gonna be able to download it from Epic Games Launcher and then add it to your project right away. But this is a way around it. And then, so the next step is you should do this whether you're gonna use ACES or sRGB or whatever. This is gonna really help. Just kind of set it up once and never have to worry about it again. I'm gonna personally use ACES, but you can use linear sRGB EXRs. You should still follow these steps. So we're gonna have to, you're gonna find some tutorials, or even you can look around. I'm gonna show you. There we go. This is our color management documentation in Unreal Engine Epic Games official website. We're gonna need to enable the Open Color IO plugin for any color management inside of Unreal. If you don't, then you're gonna lose a lot of dynamic range. And if anything is between 0 and 1, you're fine by rendering just like that. But if you want something more because you're gonna color manage it, or you want just more dynamic range, this is a step that you should just set up and learn how to do it once. So we're gonna enable that in our plugins. First, that's what you gotta do, Open Color IO. I enabled it already, and I restarted it. Make sure, I like to start from games, third person. This is just a habit that I've gotten in Fellowship, even though I'm maybe doing VR projects and whatever. As long as it's not a volume on the wall, I kind of always start with the game because I like that. You can start with whatever and then bring in the starter content pack, third person. I just like that it kind of already has a basic setup, and I know where my ground is, where my center is. It centers me, and then I turn on because I'm used to, for whichever project that I might need. Games comes in very light. and then you can continue adding the plugins you want. That way you don't select a film or VR project or anything like that. You might not necessarily need 1,000 different plugins that comes with, you know, connecting to your Oculus or iPhone or the volume behind you. So this is just the setup that I do, and it also teaches you which plugins you need every time. So it's a good habit to not super automatically get used to this. That way you know which plugin does what and when you need it and when you don't need it. The annoying part is you have to restart once you do that. So after we put in the OpenColor IO, we're gonna go ahead. I created a config file, and we're gonna go ahead and say miscellaneous. If you don't enable that plugin, you're not gonna get the OpenIO color configuration in the miscellaneous, so do that first. And once you have that, whatever configuration you want, you're gonna have to download it. In my case, I wanted ACES because I feel like in coming from world of visual effects, it makes the most sense for coloring afterwards in post-process. And you can download that. I can leave a link. I'm still figuring out how to use, as a person who makes money from technology, I'm very bad at YouTube, but I can try to leave links here. This is just the ACES 1.2 config. I downloaded that from OpenColor IO config, and once I unzipped it, this is basically pretty much what we do afterwards. We make the miscellaneous OpenColor IO configuration, and then I put the configuration file to the color space that I want, I found, and I downloaded online. This could be, you know, slog or whatever you're working with. Just download it and then put the configuration file inside this config access ACES that we created. So after this, we're gonna have to put in 2 indexes here. If you've ever used Nuke, you know this is basically OCIO configuration from what color space to what color space. So I added 2 indexes by clicking on this, and then the first one I chose utility linear sRGB because in the documentation this is Unreal's default color space, and we're always coming from that to something else. And then we're creating another second one index, and this is basically gonna be the second color space that we want to work in, and I'm choosing the ACES CG. Everything that in the configuration we put probably has these, you know, but for now ACES CG is good. After we save that, the second part is the render settings. Obviously you're gonna have your own render settings, but this is a good habit to go ahead and set that up and save that configuration, and then, you know, you can change that and duplicate it. For that, you're gonna need, if you're starting with the game, make sure you put in the movie render queue, and I'm putting the additional render passes just in case. Probably might not need it, but might be helpful later on to get some crypto mats or something to bring into DaVinci or Nuke, whatever I might use for post-processing. So once we turn that on and restart our project, then we can go into cinematics and we can go into movie render queue. So I already have set this up for this project, but what I do is I erase the JPEG sequence one and I put an EXR because I wanna work with an EXR, and I put the anti-aliasing. You can put your settings in for that later, try it out. But the most important part related to this is the color output. There is some better tutorials out there from color scientists who use this and know it probably better than me. But what I do is, if I don't ever use ACES, I make sure that, you know, I put this in and disable the tone curves, because when you look at that, it's going to give you, if true, the filmic tone curve will not be applied. Disabling this will allow you to export linear data for EXRs. Again, if you're not gonna do anything and you just want a final render, then I guess you can leave this alone in the sense that it will give you that filmic curve. I believe the exposure in the filmic curve is either 35 or 39. It cuts off in the traditional film. So you basically have values over 1, but it's not that high in the traditional film. So you can go ahead and do that. But if I'm enabling that, you're gonna realize I can't do this anymore because it's definitely gonna be already giving me the values that I need. So we're just gonna say accept. One thing I like to do is basically I would save that as a preset. This is like one of my many other presets just for the color. And then I'll go ahead and, you know, change these according to what I need. Maybe make it even pet tracing for the other scene. But for now, just basic settings. So we're gonna then find assets, my English. And usually how I approach finding assets is the Quixel bridge literally inside of Unreal Engine, or you can do the standalone, doesn't matter, and then import it from there. I'm gonna look for some ground coverage, rocks. We're gonna look for some plants, and we're gonna probably, I'm not very great at modeling myself, so I think I'm gonna try to modularly build the treehouse that we're talking about. And maybe I might take it to, you know, Blender and try and fix some stuff. But I think we can manage by building the bricks from here and try and kind of paint that asset into being more mossy and like into a treehouse. We'll see. We'll see the approach as we do that. Then I'm guessing, like I said, we're gonna have to create a landscape. So we're gonna do that inside Unreal. You could use Gaia, you could use other, you know, world creation tools. I will keep it inside of Unreal because there's so many really cool plugins that where you can even like bring in a real life area into a height map. I like working that way. And I think that Unreal 5 really has gotten better with, you know, adjusting your landscapes. And then I have written a couple of auto landscape materials, so I'll probably bring that in, but I'll explain in the, you know, next tutorials if we can look at that, how that works and how that blends with, you know, vertex blending with the mega scans or other assets that I bring. I just have to basically go into their material and make sure that everything blends with my landscape. And then we're gonna have to art direct the weather. I don't know if it's gonna go exactly in this order. I know so many people like to use the ultra dynamic sky. It's really awesome. If you don't know it, then I can show it to you. I got it somewhere here. Shout out to the creators of ultra dynamic sky. Let's take a look at it. It's not gonna work right off the box with Unreal 5.2. Yeah, typing skills. So this is the ultra dynamic sky. Basically, you can art direct your clouds, art direct your moon, the sun. But if you're kind of beginning on your journey to lighting, I suggest don't use this first. You want to go the old school style and put your own directional light, put your own exponential height fog, post-process volume, sky atmosphere, sky light, sky sphere, volumetric clouds, and like play around with it. And basically what that blueprint does is combines those together and then gives you some materials. If you want rain, you can use, in a few clicks, make it, you know, things accumulate snow or like rain reflections, which is cool. but I see it for myself as cheating if you don't know how to use these first. So go ahead and like learn your classical lighting systems, either dynamic or non-dynamic, static. I use dynamic. It's been a while since I last used static lighting, but there is value in knowing that. So we're gonna do that, and I don't know if ultra dynamic sky would work in this way if we migrated it. I think there might be some problems, but it's a possibility. We can try that to art direct it. But I have other ways to art direct my clouds and art direct the lights and everything, to make it a little bit more creepy. Totally. We can even use cloud cards, or bring in some volumetric cloud paint alphas to give the sky what we want. And I think I'm gonna attempt, in my other tutorial I used the PCGB tool to create procedural volumes of forests and any other tools you can scatter around procedurally. We can try, this is a good example to try that with trees. And for the ground, I think because we're gonna have a lot of fog in our concept, that we're not gonna really do too much ground coverage. Maybe it will be more directed to the front, and the back could do without, depending on where we set our cameras. That's the thing too. I find it useful to start level building and then maybe create 1 or 2 dummy sequences just to see like where your cameras are, just kind of block your scene, and you can change that later on. Camera moves, doesn't matter. I just want to see how long of a coverage, how big of a coverage I'm gonna need creating this world, because again, I don't want to create anything more than I need to. It will be gigantic and it won't be used, and I've done that a lot in my beginner days. And again, you can use the help of layers and world partition as well, by just uploading and downloading and turning off and turning on your map inside of Unreal, and partition your world into that map and offload or unload parts of your world. But again, for this project, we'll see if we need it. For now, I might just set up world partition just in case, but I don't think we're gonna get that big. I think for this story, we're gonna need something of 2 kilometers, maybe 1 mile, 1.5 mile. We'll center our story around this area, and then we're gonna give some detail on trees and ground and everything we work so hard to put together. But yes, I don't think that we're gonna need miles and miles. All right, and then we're gonna need to build a tree house, we're gonna need to art direct the ground, and we're gonna build a fire with Niagara Systems. Niagara has some startup plugins we can take a look at, systems already for fire and stuff. And it's a good tool to learn about it, and then maybe we can play around with it. So this is good to start playing around with everything, because it's gonna teach you and remind me everything about textures, megascans, lighting, dynamics, and procedural volume tools, then rendering and coloring. So we're gonna render our trials, find the best settings for anti-aliasing, motion blur, and everything, and which right now the plan is to go with Lumen. But if your project is different, then go with path tracing and use the documentation on Unreal for turning on your settings. It's really useful. You can even ask ChatGPT if you forget how to do something, the steps. I don't really do that because I think the information it drives is mainly from 2021 and before. I like to just refer to the Unreal Engine documentation. And then we're gonna bring the project into DaVinci or Nuke if necessary for coloring or any additional visual effects. All right. Well, I'm gonna start, I think, building, and maybe make the video in certain important parts and talk about like how I brought some stuff and what they do. And this isn't intended to be a complete tutorial of 40 hours, but I think it's really helpful to see someone else's process and kind of get the high concept idea of what they want to use and how they plan something and how it might compare to yours, or get your creative juices going. So, and if you do have any extra questions, then we can talk about that more technically in detail, more, low level, like zoom in into an issue. Because every subject we cover here is a lot on its own. And again, like we do have sort of tutorials for the procedural one already, auto landscape, all of that. And the OCIO we covered here is pretty important too. So we'll see what else we need to add to this series so that we can start sharing some information together. All right, thank you.